Achieve optimal scintillation at the Seattle International Film Festival, May 7th through 17th. With 203 films from over 70 countries, the festival will immerse you in a cinematic experience unlike anywhere else. Discover independent and international films, in person, in the heart of Seattle. There's something for everyone, so join the community and start experimenting. Additional information and tickets on sale now at sif.net/festival. In Dundee, Oregon, there's this monthly event in the heart of downtown that brings art, wine, music, and locally made goods to life. They call it Third Thursday. This May, and all throughout the summer and fall, stroll the streets of Dundee and experience wine country charm at a slower, more intentional pace. It's free and open to all, which makes it an approachable way to explore Dundee for the first time, while supporting local businesses. Visit traveldundee.com/citycast to unlock exclusive lodging deals for your stay in the Willamette Valley. This is CityCast Seattle. I'm Jane C. Hu, and here's what Seattle's talking about. A new documentary digs into Seattle's superhero scene. We talk to the director of Phoenix Jones, Rise and Fall of a Real-Life Superhero, which is playing as part of the Seattle International Film Festival this weekend. We'll also discuss contributor Marcus Harrison Green's latest piece in The Stranger, How Fear Becomes Policy. In our Friday bonus segment for CityCast Seattle Neighbors, we'll be talking about our biggest Seattle betrayals. But first, last week was the filing deadline for candidates running for federal, state, or judicial positions in the state of Washington. Here to discuss, we have Crystal Fincher, political consultant, host of the podcast Hacks and Wonks, and executive director of KVRU 105.7 FM. Welcome to the show, Crystal.
Thank you for having me.
And we have Marcus Harrison Green, founder of the South Seattle Emerald and Hinton Publishing, and co-host of the podcast In the Meanwhile. Hi, Marcus.
Hello, always great to be here, Jack.
Crystal, I know you have been following a lot of these filings and keeping track of who is running. What are the local races that you are watching most closely in the upcoming primary?
One of the biggest, which features probably the most powerful person in the Washington State Senate, Majority Leader Senator Jamie Peterson, is facing two challengers, one of whom is a fellow Democrat running as a progressive, trying to run to his left, essentially, and making the case that it's time for change. So that's Hannah Sabio Howell. There's another independent in the race, Heather Marie Wilson. In Seattle, a lot of times, independent is code for Republican. Not always, but sometimes, just because Seattle really does not have much of a history electing Republicans. So a lot of times people don't quite use that label to make it a little bit more palatable. But that's going to be a really exciting race in the 43rd Legislative District. It's one of the most progressive districts in the entire state. So we will see what's happening there.
So I have been following Sabio Howell's campaign a bit. I know she collected signatures instead of paying the filing fee. And I'm curious for both of your thoughts on this. I mean, it seems like a great way to get around paying that fee. It feels like that was also a political move as how she wants to position herself a bit.
Absolutely. It makes a political statement and demonstrates, okay, this campaign one is not about money. I'm not just paying to get my name in there. And I'm really connected to the people. I think that's something that is an asset to a lot of people. And we're seeing some candidates in some situations sound really disconnected who are not talking to regular, everyday people all the time. Not to say that people who pay the filing fee aren't doing that, but it's absolutely putting that front and center in her campaign.
What is that filing fee? Like, how much do candidates have to pay to run?
For offices with an annual salary of more than $1,000, the filing fee is 1% of the annual salary. So at like $500-ish is where we're at for legislative stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I forgot that our legislators in this state don't make a ton of money. So
they don't make a ton of money. It's technically considered a part-time job, even though the responsibility is far beyond that.
So, Crystal, you also mentioned the race in the 37th legislative district. Tell us about that. I know you've called it one of the most consequential races of 2026.
Yeah, there are a couple of different races there. One is for an open seat. So Jalen Scott, who became known as the executive director of the Lavender Rights Project, is running in this seat. Jalen Scott is a trans woman, as we know right now. Our entire LGBTQ community, and most of all, trans people, have been targets of the federal administration, of efforts here in this state to repeal rights and access to the public sphere. And so this is huge in terms of representation and real relevance in leadership. She is being challenged by Evan McCorkle in this open seat where there's not an incumbent. Evan also identifies himself as an independent. So we will see how that continues to unfold. But Jalen has a lot of endorsements, momentum going her way. So that's going to be a really interesting race. The Senate seat is a new seat that is open up. And so Chapalo Street, who was previously a representative, is now running for that Senate seat. And then in the other House seat, there is a longtime incumbent, Sharon Tomiko Santos, who is being challenged by a first-time candidate, Kalabe Tawalde, who is gaining a lot of momentum and trying to make the case that it's time for change. So a lot of really, pressing issues in the South End, issues having to do with school funding, public safety, housing affordability, and these are going to be top of mind in all three of these races that we see there.
I know that there's also a King County Council seat that was vacated, I believe, when Girmay Zahalai became county executive. I feel like there's been a little bit of musical chairs here where, because of Girmay's new position, some positions under him opened up. Yeah. So tell us about that race.
This is a really consequential race. The county council is really important. King County is the second largest jurisdiction in the state. They're dealing with all of the issues ranging from public safety to transportation and roads, public health. And they're often the people who are put in the position of implementing federal policy or fighting or resisting or making up for federal policy. Their hands are certainly full in that department right now. So Rebecca Saldana, who is currently a state senator and is stepping down to run for this, and Toshiko Hasegawa, who is a port commissioner at the Port of Seattle, are both running for this seat, both trying to demonstrate their progressive credentials and running on their record. And this is a competitive race.
You mentioned folks trying to show their progressive bona fides. Is this a trend that we're seeing, that folks are running on platforms that are shifting leftward? I mean, I think there was some discussion about that after the last election, especially with Katie Wilson taking office. Is that something that you're seeing so far in the candidates that have declared that they're running?
I think candidates are more open with saying that they're being progressive because it's really a response to where the community is at. Voters here are demanding, regardless of a label that you put on it, they're saying we want solutions that address the root causes of crime, that really invest in education, that invest in communities, that, don't treat public safety like just a competition for punishment and punitive solutions, but are really looking at reducing harm overall, prevention, and keeping everyone safe in all different types of contexts. I think they're becoming more impatient with hearing the same kinds of failed policies rehashed, feeling that there are really big problems that we're facing and maybe that people aren't bringing solutions that match the scale of the problems. And so wanting people to be big and bold and brave, because that's what people are having to do in their everyday lives as they navigate this world and these conditions that we're in.
Marcus, any thoughts on trends that you have noticed among folks who have declared candidacy?
I mean, I think voters, from what I've seen, they just want somebody who can get some shit done, right? I mean, I think when you had brought up our most recent mayoral race, right, which was, closely contested. I think Mayor Wilson ended up winning by less than 1% of the vote. And I think, when I spoke to people, it wasn't necessarily ideologically driven in terms of, whether Bruce was or Katie was too moderate or too socialist or too whatever. It was like, I don't think Bruce Harrell at the time had just done anything, right, to address anything. And so I'm willing to go to this other person just because they're saying that they're are willing to do something and actually show up to work every day. As long as it is impactful and it is effective, then I'm willing to select it.
Well, we're just at the beginning. I feel like we're like at the top of a roller coaster looking down the long drop to the August primary, but I'm sure the races will heat up over the summer as they continue. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Marcus's new piece in The Stranger about how fear becomes policy.
Hey Seattle, if you've ever wanted to see our Pacific Northwest whales, this is your moment. FRS Clipper Whale Watching is the only whale and wildlife tour departing from right in downtown Seattle. And this year, for their 40th anniversary, they're launching a brand new catamaran, the Emerald Clipper. It was built right here in Washington State, and it's designed for comfort and incredible views with spacious outdoor decks, floor-to-ceiling windows, and onboard naturalists who help you actually understand what you're seeing aboard this floating classroom. Out on the Salish Sea, you might encounter humpbacks feeding, killer whales hunting, gray whales cruising, plus bald eagles and seals and sea lions. It's not just a tour, it's a full wildlife experience. And they have a whale sighting guarantee, so if you don't see whales, you'll get a complimentary tour to use in the future. Spots fill quickly as the season ramps up, so don't wait. In fact, Sam and I have already booked our trip, and we cannot wait. You can book early too. Just go to whalewatching.com. That's whalewatching.com.
Marcus, you recently published a piece in The Stranger called How Fear Becomes Policy, where you wade into the thorny, ongoing discussion about the role of surveillance in our city. You mentioned recent violence in our city, and some, you say, are asking for more surveillance in policing. In particular, I know that there were over 1,000 signatures on a letter organized by Chinatown International District leaders requesting an expansion of the city's CCTV program. You write, when the left dismisses these voices, we run the risk of reinforcing the false but effective narrative that Seattle progressives do not care about the concerns of communities of color. It's why we should meet these perspectives with curiosity, not dismissal. What does that curiosity look like to you?
I do think there's a lot of nuance in this conversation that, quite frankly, just hasn't really been elevated. I just think that this is a conversation that many conversations in our city, that you have a lot of people talking at each other and over each other, but not necessarily with each other. And the reason that that's important, just on a very practical standpoint, is that if the expansion of surveillance does end up becoming a referendum, and I know that the mayor has thrown that out there, then it's not going to be city council members or the mayor even that you're going to have to convince. It's going to be fellow Seattleites. And, you have certain folks who continue to sort of feed into this problematic narrative. When you saw members of city council say, and they were talking about folks who showed up for public comment when they voted on this, they said, all I see is, some lefty white folks here. I don't see, folks of color, yada, 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 right? Now, number one, those meetings are usually held during the daytime at 2 p.m. and not a lot of people can go to them. Number two is the city is 70% white. So, I mean, it just by statistics
speaking
alone is most likely, right? And number three, though, I do think that narratives have been used to sort of weaponize, pushing things like this forward and particularly using the pain of these communities. And there's a lot of times where, look, if all you are offering these communities that you have not invested in, you barely ever pay attention to other than just when, some tragedy has struck, and all you are offering them is, razor wire when they're drowning, then folks are going to reach up and grasp onto that razor wire, meaning more, solutions like this that are more carceral in nature. Ultimately, if we, for us to have, this conversation, we really need to fully put out all the options that are available to us to keep us safe. And so that said, though, I do understand why some people who want more surveillance, why they would elect that option in the sense of, like one person told me, when I was doing this piece, the city is not invested into my community. And, they don't ever come around here. I see police officers who like are just in their car all the time. They're not walking the beat. They're not getting to know the community. They're not really, attempting to address any of my concerns. So at the very least, cameras are a tangible object that I can, see that they're doing something. And quite frankly, when we get to that point, that is a failure of public policy, and that is a failure of imagination. And budgets are not infinite, right? And so when we invest in more surveillance, when we invest in more carceral solutions, that is a social opportunity cost, which means we are not going to be investing in things like community activation. We're not going to be investing, in community programs, the things that, as Crystal brought up earlier, the root causes of things that so many people, want us to actually address.
Yeah, Crystal, I see you nodding. I mean, do you feel like these new candidates who are coming up in these races, is this going to be a topic of discussion as we head into the primary?
It's absolutely a topic of discussion. We're already seeing that happening. I think Marcus's point about, okay, we're fundamentally not listening to a lot of these communities, and we have people talking at each other, is very salient. And I think that there's a lot of listening that needs to be done. And part of the twisting of the narrative and what makes it so challenging is that, we hear reflected sometimes in these policy conversations what communities don't want, that there are people saying, no, that's not the right kind of solution. But we are also, if you're in community, you hear so many suggestions of things that have worked before, that community wants back, that they want to implement and try, that they want to work together and do. And that so often isn't highlighted. That isn't being listened to. And it feels like that community voices are only being highlighted when it serves some other narrative.
Yes.
We talk about budgets not being infinite, and, public safety, when you look at police spending, it's astronomical. It's one of the biggest line items in our public budgets, period.
Yeah.
And
is it not 50% of our budget,
and
Crystal?
sometimes over, and growing every year.
Right.
It's part of the structural deficit that we face in the long term. And so when you look at items that are preventative, that deal with prevention rather than responding to crime, those line items are tiny. And yet they face so much more scrutiny in many of our public conversations and these audits that we see than the huge line items. And I think people see that disconnect and are saying, how does that make sense? Why are we nickeling and diming this program that's only getting 2% of the budget, and we're ignoring what is the 35, 40, 50% of the budget there?
Right. I was talking to the owners of the Medium Collective, which is streetwear store over in Capitol Hill, right? They said that there have been people who are in, who've been in sort of mental health crisis due to addiction issues that they've had to deal with and kick out the store and so forth. One of their cashiers is a young woman who no longer feels safe working at the nighttime because what's around there. And, I expected him to be like, yeah, we need more police. We need more cameras. And he was like, we have cameras. We have police, right? And it's not keeping us safe. He said, what keeps us safe is if we can activate this community. It's community that keeps us safe, right? And so, it's just a very practical argument in the sense of what is your return on investment on this stuff, right? Like we've fully funded police, right? We've funded cameras, right? And what has been the return on investment? We still continue to have gun violence. You know what could lessen gun violence? Having fewer guns, right? How come nobody is talking about why don't we at the state level repeal RCW 9.41.290? What that basically does is that preempts any cities from being able to regulate guns on their own, that it can't override the state. And I'm like, in a place like Seattle, where we have had gun violence, where it is the most populous city in our state, we should be able to have our own gun regulation, similar to what New York City does, and actually just get to the city that I think all of us, want, is one that we can feel safe walking down the street at night.
Marcus, you write that we're told this is a debate about cameras. It is not. It is a debate about what we believe safety is and who is responsible for creating it. You also go on to ask, what would it be like to expand the menu of options that people are presented, that surveillance and policing are often kind of the options that are just on the table that people are familiar with to try and feel safe. I mean, you just pointed to a policy change that you feel like could maybe be one of the more creative options here. And Crystal, you alluded to communities talking about wanting to try things that they feel like maybe have worked in the past and maybe can work now. What are you all seeing in terms of more creative options out there?
One, what the care team was talked about and supposed to be, hey, these are non-armed responders who are trained in de-escalation, who can, attach people to resources. One of the challenges is that they're restrained in how and when and where they can respond based on the Seattle Police Officers Guild contract or the SPOG contract. And so how they're navigating that is a challenge, but everybody everywhere in community is saying more of that.
Yes.
I think everybody sees disorder on the streets. I think there's this narrative like people are denying how bad it is.
Right.
Everybody sees how bad it is. And it's so frustrating. I am frustrated every day. Yeah. I am also frustrated that the tools that are currently at our disposal that, I can call, that something I can do, are very limited. And we are calling on more of that. Just community policing, activating streets, how we design and implement our streets. There's just a lot that, is not just in the bucket that we traditionally consider to be public safety.
Yeah, and I would just like this, I think this is, quite frankly, a failure of a lot of our elected officials, just in the sense that I think that they, again, do need to lay out the full menu of, what does truly keep us safe. And then also, talk about here are the consequences of each, right?
Well, Marcus, you write, and I'll leave listeners with these words. Safety is not simply the absence of harm. It is the presence of something else entirely, including stability, dignity, and connection. The conditions that make violence less likely to occur in the first place. Those are not things you can install. They are things you have to build.
I was trying to hit you with some bars there, Jay.
And you did. They were fire.
Marcus Harrison Green, thank you so much for joining us and talking about this. And if folks want to read the full piece, which they should, you should go to thestranger.com.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jane.
Crystal Fincher, thank you so much for joining us and bringing us all of your knowledge about the upcoming races.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
When we come back, we're talking with director Bayan Joonam about his new film, Phoenix Jones, Rise and Fall of a Real-Life Superhero, which tells the story of Seattle's superhero community. The Seattle International Film Festival is off to a roiling start, and one of the hotly anticipated films showing this weekend is Phoenix Jones, Rise and Fall of a Real-Life Superhero, which tells the story of Seattle's superhero scene. Here to discuss is Bayan Joonam, who directed the film. Welcome to the show, Bayan.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Okay, first off, for those who aren't familiar, who is Phoenix Jones?
Phoenix Jones is a guy who in 2010, late 2010, decided that he wanted to tackle Seattle's crime problem by putting on a superhero suit, a black and gold superhero suit, and a mask, and confront violent crime in the middle of the night. So all of a sudden, in early 2011 and 2012, people in Belltown, in Capitol Hill, just started seeing this guy patrolling the streets, typically outside of nightclubs and bars, and he became something of a folk hero in the early days. But as time went on, I think questions started emerging around his real motives. And so what the film is really looking at is a character study into Benjamin Fodor, who is Phoenix Jones's real name, and what motivated him to start fighting crime in the streets of Seattle.
I realized I didn't know Phoenix Jones's real name. I was like, oh, it's a guy named Ben, huh?
It's a guy named Ben who is truly a one of one. And for me, the question about that drew me into making this film was more about what kind of a person thinks that this is a good idea. Like, what motivates somebody to believe that putting on a superhero suit and running around fighting crime is like the best use of their time and resources when we have all of these institutions that are set up to do just that? And so that fascinated me because I think that's part of like comic books and superhero films that we don't usually explore because we're so enthralled by the action of it. And it should be said that there is a very healthy community of real life superheroes in Seattle that operate presently.
Right. That was news to me. How did you get word of all of this? Like, how did you first get set up and in touch with all of these folks as well?
One of the people that we interview in this film is a guy named Rainn Wilson, who the audience probably knows as Dwight from The Office. Way back in the day, I started a business with him called Soul Pancake, and we were a digital channel as he was becoming famous for his role in The Office. And he would come back to the office sometimes and be like, I met this guy in Seattle. He dresses up like a superhero and fights crime. And it just kind of flew over my head at the time. Fast forward 8 years later, and right as 2019 was turning into 2020, we all know what was happening around then, where coronavirus was coming up, and
Hmm.
I just had a lot of time on my hands. So at that time, Phoenix Jones came back into the news.
Right.
And I won't spoil it to say
Yes.
exactly why, but it was for this very dramatic thing. And I was like, and it was a front page of Seattle Times. And I was like, this is insane. Like, what a twist. I have to talk to this guy. I have to figure out what is going on here. So that's what started my contact with Phoenix Jones. And then I found myself in Seattle on May 25th of 2020 to do what I thought was just going to be like an interview. But at that time, the George Floyd uprising was really gaining traction. Seattle is given a curfew and the
Right.
National Guard is called in. And so Phoenix's DMs and Twitter was getting blown up by the citizens of Seattle being like, where are you, Phoenix Jones? Are you going to do your job? The streets need you, Phoenix Jones. So that's how we found ourselves in the middle of all of this chaos that was unfolding downtown.
Yeah, you really were in town at exactly the right time. So Seattle feels like a character in the movie to me a bit. Like it went through changes alongside Phoenix Jones, and the superhero movement around here kind of shifted as the city was shifting as well. How did you think about those elements interacting and how to represent all of that on screen?
I think as we move into the 2000s and we look at the economic inequalities that exist in America at large, I think Seattle as a microcosm has a lot of that going on. Because you have so many imported people coming to work at these massive tech companies, but then you also have the native community of Seattle who is getting pushed out, priced out, gentrified to make room for this new community. So I think that as the backdrop for how you end up with certain citizens deciding to take it upon themselves to enact citizen justice or vigilantism fits into this world that feels both incredibly contemporary and part of what America is currently dealing with, but also like a mini Gotham. I think Seattle doesn't always get the credit that it deserves as being somewhere that has these pockets that I think people look at New York, Gotham as like the template for Gotham
Oh, but
City.
we're way gloomier. I feel like it fits so much better that we're Gotham.
I think so because on top of all of those things that I mentioned during the pandemic, you also have the CHOP
Yes.
where
Chop Chaz,
the
for folks who don't remember, that was the area of protest where people were basically in 6 blocks of Capitol Hill and kind of doing their own thing. Occupied
yeah.
protest is what it was called.
So 2 weeks after the National Guard's called in, the East Precinct is abandoned. And then protesters took over that 6 block area and declared it a no cop zone. So all of a sudden, you have this environment that, like, as a documentary filmmaker, I've just found so surreal because within that environment, you also have a test, a social experiment of
Totally.
what community policing could look like. And in the middle of this is these real life superheroes who decide that they will step up to the plate in an environment where there are no police officers. So they, along with several heavily armed protesters, become the law.
This might be news for people that Phoenix Jones was active in that time, because I don't remember hearing a ton about that. And usually when Phoenix Jones's name comes up in Seattle, a lot of folks very much associate his era with, the 2010s. But you get into a lot more of the history of Ben Fodor, how he came up, what led to the dissolution of, or at least the pause of these vigilantes going out together. If you want to be in the audience to see this documentary, Phoenix Jones, Rise and Fall of a Real Life Superhero is showing at SIFF Uptown Saturday and Sunday. And Bayan, I believe you're going to be there?
I will be there, and the entire superhero squad will be there. All of those guys, they haven't seen each other in like 12 years. Since the Rain City Superhero Squad broke up, there's some bad blood, so I have no idea what to expect when I put them all in a room together and have them watch this film, but it's going to be exciting.
Bayan Joonam, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
That's all for today here at CityCast Seattle, unless you're a CityCast Seattle neighbor, in which case, stick around for our bonus segment on our biggest Seattle betrayals. If you aren't already a neighbor and you want to hear that, you can join us at membership.citycast.fm/Seattle. I'm your host, Jane C. Hu. Our executive producer is Ashley Smith. Our creative producers are Sam J. Leeds and Liam Billingham. Post-production this week was done by PJ Shahamat. Our audience development manager is Ben Keenan. Music is by Aaron Taylor Waldman, All the Kimonos, and Los Mocachetes, with additional mixing by Tyler Lindgren. Our ad music is by Sven Lindvall and Sarah, the instrumentalist from Epidemic Sounds via Getty Images. And listeners, remember that we always love hearing from you all. Send us your thoughts on Phoenix Jones, or if you've spotted a Seattle superhero recently, we want to hear all about it. Send us an email at seattle@citycast.fm. You can also text us or leave us a voicemail at 206-880-3931. Until next week, see ya, Seattle. If you're enjoying the podcast, be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen so you never miss an episode. Also, leave us a little review. It's really helpful. And tell your friends about us. You can also get more local news and events delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter. Just go to seattle.citycast.fm. And you can find us on Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok at CityCast Seattle, and you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube.